My name is William Mayville. I'm the program manager of the WolfPack Orbital Launch Funding Competition, otherwise known as WolfC. I'd like to begin my presentation by discussing secondary STEM education in the status quo. However, there are two things I need to preface my remarks with. First, because WolfC is currently focused on students in the United States, my remarks are based on the education system in the US. Second, I'm going to be using terms such as secondary and secondary education frequently throughout my presentation. What I mean by that is students roughly within the age group of 11 to 18. That said, let's begin. We see that the current STEM education model falls short as it does not prepare students for the workforce in three ways. First, it fails to develop critical 21st century skills that are highly valued in the private sector. Second, on the technical side, education is primarily siloed and conceptual, with students simply memorizing facts for the next test and failing to develop an in-depth understanding of material. Third, at the secondary level, socioeconomic class is frequently tied to success in education. As a result, many individuals are not able to gain access to effective STEM education. The impact of this is workforce depletion. There's currently a significant excess of demand for labor in STEM fields such as aerospace. A recent study from the United States Census Bureau indicates that only 28% of STEM educated students actually entered a STEM-related field. As such, there needs to be a shift at the secondary level in STEM education in order to alleviate this problem. The solution must be both long-term and include a shift to experiential, hands-on learning opportunities. One solution to that problem is the CubeSat. The CubeSat is a type of nanosatellite. It is form-fitting and built in 10 centimeter increments. For example, a 1U is 10 centimeters by 10 centimeters by 10 centimeters. A 2U is 20 centimeters by 10 centimeters by 10 centimeters, and so forth. CubeSats have been proven to be effective educational tools through the usage at the university level. This is because they are cost efficient, simple, user-friendly, and, as stated, rather small. However, at the secondary level, there are a number of potential problems with their implementation, the first of which is funding. While CubeSats are dramatically less expensive than past alternatives and their larger cousins, they're still far too expensive for secondary students and teams who take advantage of the opportunity presented by them. Even if a secondary team manages to acquire the necessary funds, they will then run into the second problem, and that is the general lack of CubeSat curriculum and CubeSat knowledgeable instructors, making it incredibly difficult to create and then effectively manage a CubeSat team. All these problems have been solved to some extent by the WolfPack CubeSat development team, WolfC's parent organization, as well as WolfC itself. I'm going to get to that a bit later in the presentation. A current mainstream solution is a NASA-run program called the CubeSat Launch Initiative, or CSLI. However, the CSLI is an ineffective method of extending the STEM pipeline to secondary education using CubeSats en masse. The first reason is that it is not designed for secondary education. The CSLI is focused on federally funded research institutions as well as top universities. Obviously, a proposal that comes out of the middle or high school level does not have any chance of successfully competing with a proposal from such a top institution run by aerospace professionals or university students. Second, there's a very limited number of spots available for launch, usually ranging between 10 and 20. This further limits secondary student opportunities. Third, NASA prioritizes missions that coincide with NASA's interests and objectives. Well, of course, it's their prerogative to do so, but the fact that these objectives are generally vaguely worded and further disenfranchises secondary students. As such, a shift is necessary. Specifically, a shift that enables secondary students to engage in real-world aerospace opportunities. This principle is viable as demonstrated by the WISAT-1. The WISAT-1's mission was investigating the viability of a particular strain of extremophile bacteria in space. And the process of the WISAT-1 was composed of 6 main stages: selection, development, testing and certification, integration, launch, and operations. Throughout each of these stages, as well as follow-up presentations and papers, students develop not just technical skills and abilities, but also develop critical 21st century skills such as critical thinking, creativity, collaboration, as well as communication. WISAT-1 is an example of what secondary students are capable of accomplishing when given the necessary opportunities. The second CubeSat that was accepted the second accepted CubeSat from the WCT was the CAPSAT-1. The CubeSat one's mission is investigating the viability of capacitors as an alternative to lithium-ion polymer batteries in nanosatellites. It was formulated entirely by middle school students and was launched earlier this month. The CubeSat one is yet another example of the capabilities of secondary students. The third example, the CubeSat one, is different from the previous two missions in a number of ways. The mission of the CubeSat one is testing the efficacy of a number of methods of radiation protection by analyzing bit flip arrays. The CubeSat one team is managed by students as opposed to teachers, and it is also the proof of concept mission for WolfC, something I'll explain in a bit. The solution that is being pioneered by the WCDT and WolfC in response to the aforementioned problems is one of facilitating a shift at the secondary level in STEM education for a focus on the development of hands-on experiential learning opportunities. The goal of this is development of quote-unquote smart creators. And what I mean by this is development of students who are not just technically capable and adept, but also students who are able to communicate, collaborate, and perform other activities in relation to 21st century skills and succeed in the private sector, because that is the ultimate goal of initiatives such as the ones pioneered by WolfC and the WCDT, to prepare students to not just enter the STEM workforce, but to succeed in the STEM workforce. Now moving on to WolfC itself. WolfC is two-pronged, with the first objective being a short-term objective, and that is the creation of a multi-tiered competitive grant system in order to give students access to hands-on learning opportunities using methods such as CubeSats. This competition will of course include component guidelines in order to adhere to both federal regulations as well as agreements with any potential corporate sponsors that are generated in the next few months. As I mentioned in the previous slide, the WolfC grant system is multi-tiered, and what I mean by that is at 3 tiers. The first tier is an abstract. Of course, submission is required in order to be eligible to receive the grant. The abstract will allow for an initial team profile to be established, as well as for the viability of the mission to be determined, and it's essentially going to be an overview of the proposed mission. In the event that a team makes it past the first stage, the team will move on to the second phase, which is the submission of a more formal technical paper like proposal. This will allow for a more complete and holistic assessment of the mission, and including all of its facets, not just a brief overview. In the event that a team makes it to the third component, a live final presentation at a quote-unquote pitch fest, the goal of this will be to develop communication skills through a public speaking event. However, technical and 21st century skills are designed to be developed throughout this process. A second long-term goal of WolfC is to fundamentally change STEM education at the secondary level in order to shift the focus to hands-on experiential learning opportunities to allow students to develop 21st and technical skills, 21st century and technical skills. This will be done through a multi-phase process. The first step is identifying knowledgeable instructors through methods such as social networking platforms, as well as conferences such as this one. Once that is accomplished, WolfC, the WCDT, and our parent/affiliate organizations will partner with motivated instructors. And along the way, we will host a number of educational seminars, the goal of which will be to bring the private sector and educators together in order to effectively extend the STEM pipeline to the secondary level. There are 2 long-term goals to this. The first is the creation of CubeSat curriculum, and this leads into the second long-term goal, which is independent program growth across the country. The first of the aforementioned educational seminars is the first annual Small Set Education Conference, which will be hosted at the Kennedy Space Center from the 29th to the 30th of October 2022. At this conference, admission will be free to both students and educators, and joining them will be aerospace professionals from companies, from a wide variety of companies in the industry, as well as industry leaders. The goal of this conference is to, once again, bring the private sector and educators together in order to optimally extend the STEM pipeline to the level of secondary education using methods such as CubeSats. Now let me share an amazing success story with you, and that is the proof of concept mission that I introduced earlier, the CubeSat 1. The CubeSat 1 demonstrates the viability of both the funding and educational components of WolfC. Let's begin with the funding. WolfC has successfully raised the funds for both the testing and the launch of the CubeSat 1. As such, a launch services agreement was able to be signed with it earlier this year, and the CubeSat 1 is scheduled to be launched in 2023. In addition, the CubeSat 1 is planned to be managed entirely through the private sector without the use of federal funding, and in this regard, it has been an amazing success, thus demonstrating the viability of WolfC's funding goals. Moving on to education, there are two components to this: student interest and student ability. In terms of student interest, despite existing for mere months, the CubeSat 1 team has become one of the most popular and one of the largest student-run organizations on campus, thus demonstrating student interest. When it comes to student capabilities, students are not just working effectively as a team and leading the team in fact, but they are effectively accomplishing a number of technical tasks. Thus, CubeSat 1 is demonstrative of the viability of WolfC both in education and funding. So now I'll summarize the goals of WolfC. The first goal is to diversify the CubeSat funding pool through the creation of a multi-tiered competitive grant system. This will allow the usage of CubeSats and other such technologies at the secondary level en masse. The second goal is to effect a long-term change in secondary STEM education to focus on the experiential, hands-on learning opportunities. This will be done through identifying knowledgeable instructors, partnering with motivated instructors, creating the creation of educational seminars. There's ultimately culminating in the creation of CubeSat curriculum for the secondary level, as well as independent program growth. The new space economy has presented us with a number of exciting and, frankly, unprecedented opportunities. However, in order to take advantage of those opportunities, an effective STEM pipeline is critical. WolfC and CubeSat 1 have demonstrated both the viability and importance of secondary STEM experiential, hands-on learning opportunities at secondary STEM education. As such, it is essential to effect a shift of the focus of secondary STEM education to such opportunities and develop 21st century as well as technical skills. When given the necessary opportunities, students are not just able to enter STEM, they're able to thrive in STEM. Thank you, and I'm now open to any questions.